Hello to all fans of scary horror stories. In today's video we will tell you about the 5 scariest true horror stories in the world. These are not just children's nightmare stories for the night. These are real stories that happen to real people around the world. Enjoy watching. A few years ago my boss went on holiday for a couple of weeks to Spain. Midway through the holiday he got a phone call from the police informing him that his sister had passed away in a fire in her flat. So he rushes back home early, deals with the police and the passing and everything. My employers told him to take some time off to grieve, which he duly did. When he came back to work on a Monday morning a few weeks later, we invited him into our coffee room to talk and offer him our sympathies and support. About half an hour later he excuses himself to start work. He walks into his office, sits down at his desk, turns on his computer, and checks to see if there are any answer phone messages. And the very first message that plays is his sister, screaming down the phone,
"Help me! I'm trapped, I can't breathe!"
Still sends chills down my spine to think about it. As you can imagine, he was pretty traumatized. A single mother of a toddler, Dorothy Jane Scott, started getting threatening phone calls at work. She paid the calls little attention until one night when the ominous voice on the other end of the line instructed her to look outside. On her car's windscreen was a single withered rose. The stalker would alternate between declaring his love for her and making threats of physical harm. The caller's voice sounded familiar, but Dorothy couldn't place who it was. And she never got to find out. At a staff meeting, Dorothy noticed that one of her coworkers appeared unwell. She and another coworker took the man to a neighboring hospital. Dorothy went outside to the parking lot while her 2 coworkers waited for the prescription to be filled. She wasn't seen again after that. According to her coworkers' testimony, they went outside to meet her in the parking lot after she didn't return. They suspected a problem had occurred with her son when they spotted her car rushing away as soon as they left the building. Neither her son nor anyone else ever saw or heard from Dorothy again. Her remains were discovered at a construction site 4 years later. The discovery of a collection of dog bones next to her remains added even more confusion to the case. No one has ever been found guilty or detained on suspicion. The caller has never been located. My grandmother's entire life had a recurring nightmare. In this nightmare, she would be walking down a long dark hallway, turn to the left, open a door, and see something terrible. She'd always wake up before seeing what it was. In her 40s, she, her husband, my dad, and my aunt were on vacation. They booked the hotel at the last minute, so they ended up having to get 2 rooms with 2 twin beds on opposite sides of the floor. My dad wakes up around 3 a.m. and can automatically tell something's not right. He calls out in the darkness, "Dad!" No response. He turns on the bedside light. "Dad!" he says, a little louder this time. Still no response. Getting worried, he slides out of bed and shakes his father. He doesn't wake up. My dad ran down the hotel hallway to my grandma's room and started banging on the door. My grandma worriedly opens the door, and my dad shouts, "Something's wrong with Dad!" He leads her down the hallway, a long hallway, to the last door on the left. My grandmother reaches the door, turns to the left, and sees her husband deceased in bed. Heart attack. She never had the dream again. When it was published in 2013, The Conjuring received favorable reviews. Most viewers believed that James Wan's all-too-realistic depiction of the demonic haunting of an innocent family was all his vivid imagination. However, The Conjuring's inspiration came from American paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren's actual, terrifying real-life experiences. The first movie, which centers on the Perron family, is where the actual story of The Conjuring starts. In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a large farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Soon after their arrival, Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters started to witness paranormal activities. It all began modestly. Carolyn would notice the broom disappear or move on its own. When no one was home, She occasionally heard something in the kitchen or discovered little clumps of dirt in the middle of a freshly mopped floor. According to reports, Carolyn looked into the house's past and learned that 8 generations of the same family had lived there, men of whom had passed away in mysterious or terrible circumstances. Ed Warren, a veteran of WW2 and a self-taught demonologist, and his wife, Lorraine, a medium who could communicate with the spirits, visited the parents' house numerous times throughout their residence to investigate the paranormal. Andrea, the oldest of the 5 girls, claimed that the family stayed in the house for so long because of their poor financial situation. Once they relocated in 1980, the hauntings stopped. An article about a family frightened by 3 purportedly demon-possessed kids appeared in the Indianapolis Star, now Indy Star. In 2014, concerned mother LaToya Ammons turned to the police, and Gary Police Captain Charles Austin took the case. Austin said it was the strangest story he had ever heard. He initially thought that Indianapolis resident LaToya Ammons and her family made up a complicated story to make money. Austin changed his views after numerous visits to their house and discussions with witnesses. LaToya Ammons and her family's story contains unsettling accounts of kids scaling walls, levitating above their beds unconscious, abruptly passing out, and speaking in demonic voices. Ammons' mother also remembers waking up in the middle of the night and seeing a shadowy figure of a passing man and then finding large, wet boot prints. Still, the family's bizarre occurrences, either brought on by a pattern of delusions or demon possessions, led to one of the strangest instances the Department of Child Services has ever dealt with. The news site received nearly 800 pages of official papers that provided a detailed account of several of the occurrences, and more than a dozen interviews with police, DCS employees, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. Subscribe to our channel now for more haunting tales and bone-chilling stories. Turn on notifications to never miss a video from us. Don't forget to support us with a like and write any comment. It's not difficult for you, but it will help us a lot in promoting the channel.